what's up everyone, it's Emily and welcome back to my channel. Now, I am someone who, when I'm reading, I do not think about the quantity of books I read. I think mainly about the quality of the books that I read. I think about, is this a book that I want to be spending my time reading? Is it something that I want to share with people? Is it something that helps me engage with the people that I want to talk about books with? You know, I think about those kinds of things when I think about books that I want to read, not necessarily for the year, you know, trying to read 100, 200, 300, 400, however many books. For the people who are able to do that, I think that is amazing. I will never dim anyone's light who is able to read 300 books in a year. That's just not really necessarily doable for me. However, this past year in 2022, for the first time ever, I read 100 books in a year, which is wild to me. I never thought that I would be able to read that much in a year ever, let alone a lot of books in it being 5-star reads that I absolutely loved and adored. So that was super exciting for me. And I made some changes to my reading habits last year that actually allowed me to do that. And my reading goal for this year is still at 50 books because that's my goal for the year. If I read more than that, that's amazing. But I'm never going to try and pressure myself or force myself to read more than I think I'm capable of in a year, because then I will just disappoint myself or something like that. Because to me, the reading goal is, it's just a number. It's not something that I necessarily care about too much, but when I don't reach the goals that I set for myself, it hurts my soul. I made a few changes in my reading habits this past year in 2022 that I think exponentially raised the amount of books that I can read in a year. And so I want to share with you some things that I did that you could add to your reading habits to maybe help you reach your reading goal for the year. But as always, for me, it's about quality over quantity. But if you are someone who just wants to read and read and read and have a ton of books, or maybe you have a huge physical TBR that you want to get through, tons of books that you want to read and you just feel like you don't have time, maybe these will help you reach more of those books or finish more of them faster. So these are some things that made a difference for me in 2022 that I'm going to hopefully keep doing in 2023. My first tip is going to be to read every single day, even if it's just 10 minutes. Think of reading like you are someone working on an ice sculpture and your TBR is a huge block of ice. If you continue and you read 10 minutes a day, you're gonna have a better and easier time chipping away at that ice block than trying to force yourself to read for 6 hours in one day or something like that. Because for me, if I keep putting it off, I'll never get to it. So if I just make it a habit to read 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes a day, I'm chipping away at the amount of pages in my book that I'm able to read, whether that's right before bed or right in the morning before I get out of bed. During my lunch break at work, I read for about 20-30 minutes a day there. It helps me get further ahead in reading and reading more consistently versus just waiting until I have a chunk of time to sit down and read. I also find that if I just sit down and read for a really long time, I end up exhausting myself and then I am not wanting to read much more after that. In order to continue reading more and more, I want to read more consistently, even if it's in smaller chunks, so that I can create more of a habit of reading. And I always say start low and work your way up, because reading, just like writing, singing, anything else, is a muscle. It is something that you can teach your brain to be better at, in my opinion. I don't know if that's actually scientifically fact, but for me, the way that my brain works is that if I'm more consistent with my reading muscle and I read a little bit every day, I'm more likely to continue reading, and I can work my way up to reading for a couple hours a day by starting with 10-15 minutes. And just like lifting weights, the more consistent you are doing it, the easier it will be to, first of all, find the time to do it, because you'll make it more of a priority, but then also it'll just not seem like a chore, which, if you love reading, hopefully it's not a chore, but sometimes if a book is really a slog to get through, this can help really get through that, the book. But that, I'm gonna come back to that in a bit. Tip number 2 is to read shorter books. Now, this is mainly if quantity is your deal. I sometimes read shorter books because my attention span sometimes is not super great for long books, and I get around the halfway point and then I kind of fall off the point of finishing it. So if you're someone like me and you have a hard time paying attention to long books or classics or stuff like that that just really drag on, just I would say read something short and quick, because first of all, for me, that gets me out of a reading slump I can read a short book in a day and then I'm oh, now I just want to read all the time, versus if I'm reading a 2,000 page book, sometimes it can feel like a slog to get through, and it just takes me so long to get through it. There's nothing quite as satisfying as turning that last page in the book and being oh, finished it. Like, what a victory. Like, the dopamine rush is incredible. And I mean, if that is why you read, or you enjoy reading that, or you just really love the fast pacedness of these quick books, like, there's nothing wrong with that. And don't let anyone tell you that there is. We all read for different reasons, and you know, I really don't think we should necessarily judge too harshly, especially if you're just someone who just really wants to read tons of different things. I mean, I've been reading a lot of poetry books, and I mean, this is how big most of them are, you know, like, obviously I'm gonna get through these much faster, and these are really great for in between those bigger books when I just want the thrill. Oh my gosh, I'm holding it upside down. When I just want the thrill of finishing a book and just the satisfaction of it. And like, that keeps me motivated to want to keep reading sometimes. And that's okay, especially if I'm in a slump. And if it's just to hit your goal because you want to hit your goal, like, I'm also like a huge supporter of that. Like, I have no issue with that. Another option would be to also read, you know, if you're into theater, if you want to read plays, those are normally pretty short, quick reads. You could also read comic books or graphic novels. Those always tend to be very fast reads for me as well, and they are so fun and so important. I just finished one called Sheets, which I really, really loved. It had a beautiful story to it, and it took me a day to read. Like, honestly, if you're just someone who wants to consume lots of books, I think that's a great way to do it. My third tip is audiobooks. Now, I have to tell you, listening to audiobooks changed my life. Not even kidding. So the app Hugo and I use, we pay like 10 euros a month, and we get unlimited access to their entire library. So it's not like Audible, where you get one free book a month and then you have to buy anything else except for their like collection. This is like the entire thing. And this one can only go up to 2 times speed, but that's okay. Like, for me, I know some people that's still pretty slow when they're listening to audiobooks, but for me, it's fine. And I have to say, being able to listen to a book on 2 times speed makes a huge difference when it comes to listening to audiobooks. I had no clue about that when I first started. I was like, why would people do that? But now I'm like, I can't listen to it anything slower than like 1.75. And honestly, I've began listening to audiobooks more than I listen to music, which is crazy to me. So like, I find myself like when I'm on my way to work or I'm coming home from work, I take public transport and I'm listening to audiobooks. I get like an hour and a half in a day just from like being on the tram to work, to and from work. I get an hour and a half a day of reading that way. And then, you know, if I'm at home and I'm doing the dishes or cleaning the apartment, I'll listen to my audiobook while I do that. And I have to say, on 2 times speed, most audiobooks I listen to are 4 to 8 hours in length. So if you do the math, depending on the book that I'm reading, that's like 3 days going to work, and then that book is done. And that's not including any other books that I'm reading at the same time. Another nice thing about it is that I can see how much longer in the book I have left, so I can schedule my time around listening to it if that's something I want to do. Or if it's like, okay, I have 30 minutes of this audiobook left, I have 30 minutes of time to just like sit and listen to this, or do the laundry for 30 minutes and listen to my audiobook. Like, that has helped me kind of get in my mind how much time I have to listen to it, I guess. And if I see I only have 15-20 minutes left of my book, I will prioritize just finishing it. You know, that's less than a TV show. That's like 1 episode of Parks and Rec. Like, yeah, I can sit down and do that instead of watching an episode of whatever, if that's what I want to do with my time today. It also just makes it seem more manageable to me in that sense. And versus like when I'm reading a physical book, I have a really hard time guessing how much longer it's going to take for me to finish it. So like, if I see I have 100 pages left, sometimes that's an hour of reading, sometimes that's 30 minutes of me reading, and I just like have a really hard time guessing where that range is going to be. Versus when I'm listening to it, I know exactly how much longer I have left, which can be really nice. There are tons of resources that you can find to listen to books, and that includes your local library and YouTube, which are both free, which is awesome, and you should definitely check that out if you're interested in listening to audiobooks. And I mean, I always advise away from Audible, but I also understand that like you have to go where you have access to. And so like, if that's the only app that you can use, that's fine. There's also Scribd and a couple other resources that I'm like, totally blocking off the top of my head. I can't think. Spotify has audiobooks, as well as, is it Speechify? Which I know it sounds like they're related, but they're not. So those are all different resources for finding audiobooks, and they're everywhere, and honestly changed the game for me. Like, I genuinely think I read like 20 books in the span of like 2 months only on audiobook, because I had the time and that's what I was doing. So that is definitely an option if you're someone who wants to listen to books. My fourth tip is to not be afraid to DNF. And me personally, I don't count my DNFs toward my reading goal if I can help it, unless I'm like 80% of the way there, and then I'm just like, you know what? Not for me. And if you use Storygraph, you actually have a DNF option, which is really cool, and I definitely recommend checking that out. Storygraph is amazing. I'm also doing a video on that coming up, so watch out for that. Sometimes if I'm reading a book that I hate, it just puts me in the worst slump ever, and it stops me from reading for weeks, if not months. And so if I'm really just not enjoying a book, even if it's a book I want to finish eventually, I will just put it down, and I'll be like, I'll come back for you later. Just go away for now, and I will go read something easier, like a YA fantasy or a contemporary romance or anything like that. Something really easy on my brain that I will just really enjoy and just eat it up. I think that's why I tend to have so many YA fantasies on my shelf, because those are the ones that are my go-to when I just like don't know what else I want to read. As a mood reader, I really try to be flexible with myself and like what I'm in the mood to read, and I can't really be too stringent or else I will force myself into a slump, and that is going to definitely counteract me reaching my goal. Anyway, that way, like picking up something else that like puts me in a better mood definitely puts me in a place where I am okay to read and I'm like not putting myself in a slump for like 3 or 4 months. Number 5 is to keep yourself accountable. So for this, I encourage people to tell their friends about their reading goal. You know, on Storygraph and Goodreads, you can announce like, I'm gonna read 25 books this year, and tell everyone that that's how many books you want to read. Keep a journal for yourself. Make a spreadsheet online, you know, make it enjoyable so that every time you finish a book, you feel like you did something, like you accomplished something. And, you know, if you complete your reading goal, promise yourself a reward of some kind, whether it's that you're gonna buy yourself a couple new books at the end of the year, you're gonna eat a whole cake or something in December if you reach your goal. I don't know, just like make it exciting for you. Let yourself have something in reward for finishing your goal, and like hold yourself to it. And like reaching the goal and like working towards it is something like fun, and you're gonna get something in return for it as well, beyond the satisfaction of reaching your goal. Those are the tips I have for you to help finish your reading goal for the year 2023. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions yourself that you'd like to share, please feel free to comment them down below. I would love to hear what you have to say. Whether you finished 1 book this year or 100, you're doing amazing, and I want to thank you for being here as always. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to subscribe and like this video for more bookish and writing content. I hope you're doing well. Have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.